Welcome into the Veiled Archive. This is kind of a preamble to the preamble. In today's video, we're going to be exploring Black Southern Gothic. Now, it is a genre within its own, but it does fall within the pillars of my Hegemony of Dread, or our Hegemony of Dread, which will also kind of be unveiled in the following video. I just wanted to say that when Beatrice Winifred Iker's novel went live, or when it released, I was so excited for that. I am by no means an expert on Black Southern Gothic, but that doesn't mean that I don't have some agency here, because I'm not foreign to it either. And we'll get into that in the video. But I think it's really important to understand specifically what Iker states in a thesis that she had submitted to Nightmare Magazine. And we'll get into that pretty much all week, because it really is important to understand where she's coming from, and realistically, to tell the Black story, it must be told by the Black author. And as these videos prepare you for the review video for I'll Make a Spectacle of You, I think you'll understand and at least come to appreciate the effort put in here. Um, Black authors have been as integral to American horror literature as anyone. Um, their stories have been told, written, and published along the likes of Edgar Allan Poe and H.P. Lovecraft. And it needs a bigger space and calling attention to it. So honestly, this one really excites me, and I'm really looking forward to this introduction video. The project that I hinted at in the Lovecraft video, I think last week, but also just the expose they put together for I'll Make a Spectacle of You, which should be it'll be later this week. I don't know if it'll be on Thanksgiving Day per se, or night rather, but Thursday night, Friday morning, or at least Friday night at the latest. Because there's a lot to get to into that one. And on that note, I know like the YouTube SEO and algorithms don't necessarily care for really long format videos, but I've stated many times over that I owe it to the authors, and I think I owe it to the viewers, to put as much passion as I can into creating the videos, because these authors have put so much of themselves into their stories. So, I mean, if you've been around from the beginning, you've noticed that, I mean, the videos were fairly shorter in the beginning, and they're going to get exponentially larger. Um, this is one of those cases where I would ask you, uh, the viewers, leave it in the comments below or what have you. But do you appreciate shorter videos and I can just make parts, or would you rather have the longer format where it's the half hour plus? Anyways, just let me know. Comments below. I will have I have an email attached to the channel uh, for this, and I'll have that on the screen here. But yeah, anyways, I wanted to get through that, and I know also that I mentioned taking out the intros to these, but I don't think I'm going to do that. In fact, I worked on a short one over the weekend, and I might roll that out at some point. We'll see. I don't know what more that's going to add to the video length and or size, so we'll see how that goes. But without further ado, let's get into the introduction here.
Welcome in to the Veiled Archive.
Welcome into the Veiled Archive. We're starting something big here, a project we call Architects of Horror. When you look at the genre, from the earliest surviving myth to the latest bestseller, there's a persistent illusion, the myth of the new fear. We think we've invented terror because we see a new monster, a bioengineered virus, an AI, or a terrifying cosmic entity. But what if the monster isn't the point? What if the real story of horror is the structural blueprint beneath the surface? This project is a deep dive into that idea. It is the definitive, systematic attempt to prove that the history of horror isn't a graveyard of discarded monsters. It's an unbroken chain of architectural handoffs. Each successful story of dread relies on a structural blueprint created by a preceding master. We call this the hegemony of dread. Our core thesis is that the hegemony systematically traces the literary lineage that moves the source of fear from the external, cosmic unknown to the internal, psychological self. To understand modern dread, you must understand the ancient and intellectual problem it attempts to solve. It starts at the dawn of written history, with the epic of Gilgamesh, which establishes the primal fear of mortality and cosmic indifference, the terrifying philosophical truth that humanity is irrelevant to the universe. The fear is the emotional source code for all subsequent terror. Now, to measure how fear evolves, you need a single unwavering metric. For us, that is the Lovecraft metric. We use the philosophical pessimism of H.P. Lovecraft, the undisputed hegemonic apex of the genre's intellectual lineage, to define the structural endpoint. Lovecraft codified the ultimate terror as the mind confronting the unsolvable, indifferent cosmos. Every single architect who came before or after Lovecraft is measured by this question. Did they create a horror that is solvable or unsolvable in nature? Our project chronicles the structural chain that gradually dismantles every comforting human system, law, ritual, faith, science, in the slow, inevitable approach to Lovecraft's final, devastating truth. This journey culminates in the modern literary landscape, where all successful horror narratives fall into one of three dominant commercial blueprints or pillars. Pillar A is the visceral thriller. This is the realm of solvable, contained dread, asserting that the individual hero, armed with intellect, can defeat the scientific and systematic threat. Pillar B, the small town cosmic epic. This is the realm of unsolvable generational dread. It fuses the Lovecraftian cosmic scale with the emotional accessibility of Stephen King, confirming that primal evil is systemic and inevitable. Pillar C, the experimental psyche. This is the realm of psychologically unsolvable dread. It inherits the ambiguity of Poe, Chesnutt, and Jackson, proving the terrifying unreliability of the human mind and consensus reality. Today, we address the critical spot in horror history by confirming legitimacy of Black Southern Gothic, BSG, as a foundational architectural pillar on its own. This endeavor carries a crucial ethical weight. As an outside observer, my role is to track the structural lineage, the how of the dread, while practicing structural deference to the cultural lineage, the who and why, as championed by authors like Beatrice Iker. My familiarity with this structural journey began years ago with the required curriculum reading of Octavia E. Butler's seminal novel Kindred. That experience ignited an interest in how Black authors use speculative fiction to express and process trauma. Butler's work traces a lineage of fear that parallels Poe and Shelley, proving that the genre's structural solutions were emerging across different cultural contexts for nearly 2 centuries. The genius of BSG lies in its masterful structural inversion of the traditional Gothic template. It rejects the solvable dread of the European tradition and expresses a uniquely American, systemic, and inherited horror that demands a new blueprint. The credibility of BSG rests on three measurable structural inversions. A. The inversion of the source, systemic contamination. The Gothic model anchored its fear in a single correctable flaw. BSG transforms this. The earliest architect, Charles W. Chesnutt, pioneered the architecture of systemic dread. He established that the curse was not a private murder, but the systemic generational sin of chattel slavery, what we call plantation Gothic. This established that the inherited guilt is systemic and uncorrectable by a simple plot resolution. This inversion is perfected by Toni Morrison's structural critique, which uses the specter in Beloved as a spiritual manifestation of unresolved historical violence and generational grief, proving the curse is an inescapable contamination that haunts the living present. B. The inversion of agency, spiritual law as resistance. When human law fails, BSG structurally empowers the marginalized through an alternative framework. In the Robin model, the ghost seeks justice through the court system. The horror is solvable. But where the system is corrupt, the narrative must turn elsewhere. Hoodoo and Conjure, the spiritual elements, function as the alternative juridical system. This ritual is an act of agency and spiritual justice against an unyielding system. Contemporary architects like Tananarive Dew and Eden Royce center this agency, ensuring their characters have impact and survival by leveraging internal or spiritual power, rejecting marginalized victim tropes. And C, the inversion of the psyche from madness to rational paranoia. The final crucial inversion redefines psychological collapse. In the European model, Poe and Stevenson, mental distress is driven by an internal flaw or pathology. The BSG tradition, drawing on the Ira Levin blueprint of systemic betrayal, structurally establishes that the protagonist's suspicion or distress is rational paranoia. The psychological siege is caused by the institutional structure that constantly attempts to gaslight and destroy the protagonist's reality. Octavia Butler's Kindred structurally perfects this, making the black body the literal embodiment of the past's trauma, proving that the physical body is the target of historical dread and that paranoia is a rational response to an objectively hostile reality. Victor LaValle continues this, recontextualizing Mary Shelley's scientific monster as a parent's rational desire to use technology to protect the black son from systemic violence. The structural audit is complete. By tracking the homework, we confirm that Black Southern Gothic is not a niche genre, but a foundational architect whose structural innovations are essential to understanding the evolution of the horror hegemony. This is why the work of Chesnutt, Morrison, Dew, Butler, LaValle, Royce, and Iker is so critical. They mastered the universal blueprint of fear and structurally modified it to speak an uncomfortable, undeniable truth that the American horror experience is one of unsolvable systemic dread. This exercise confirms that the modern horror hegemony is strong only when it includes, analyzes, and defers to the voices who have structurally mastered the horror of an unsolvable world. Thank you for joining me for this architectural snapshot. We'll see you soon for our deep dive review, where we apply this framework to Beatrice Winifred Iker's I'll Make a Spectacle of You. And until next time on the Veiled Archive.